The mistake was made at 11:47 p.m. The air in the penthouse office was so quiet Amara could hear the soft whir of the servers in the adjacent room, a sound she'd come to associate with the deep, humming power of the man she worked for.
Kvontayon.
The city of Seoul was a tapestry of light spread 38 floors below, a silent, glittering beast that belonged to him. Amara's world, however, was confined to the 26 inches of her monitor, the sterile scent of glass cleaner, and the absolute, unwavering precision required of her. She was his executive secretary, a gatekeeper, a ghost who organized the life of a man who dealt in shadows. She scheduled his meetings with men whose tailored suits couldn't hide the coldness in their eyes. She managed the logistics of his acquisitions, which never appeared on any stock exchange. She did her job with a competence that bordered on invisibility. It was the only way to survive in this ecosystem of quiet, lethal men. Her phone buzzed on the corner of the desk, a small, personal intrusion in this temple of corporate steel and Italian marble. A picture from her sister, Maya, back in Chicago. It was a stupid selfie, Maya grinning with a mouthful of pizza, her dog photobombing in the background. A pang of homesickness, sharp and sudden, cut through Amara's professional armor. It had been 6 months since she'd seen her. 6 months in this cold, beautiful cage. Her fingers flew across the screen, her mind momentarily back in her sister's chaotic, warm apartment. "I miss you." Her thumb hit send. A fraction of a second later, a cold dread washed over her, so intense it felt like falling. She hadn't been in her personal messages. She had been in her WorkSecure app, confirming a late-night cargo transfer. The message, 3 simple, damning words, had not gone to Maya. Message sent to Kwon Tae-jun. The air left her lungs. Her blood turned to ice. She stared at the screen, at his name, a stark, formal moniker above her catastrophic error. There was no unsending it, no deleting it from the server. It was there, an intimate, emotional confession delivered to a man who had no emotions, a man whose entire empire was built on control, on the absence of personal weakness, a man who paid her an obscene amount of money to be perfect. She thought about the rules, the unspoken commandments of his world. Rule 1. Loyalty is absolute. Rule 2. Mistakes are debts. Rule 3. Never, ever, bring your personal life into his. She had just broken all 3. A soft chime echoed through the office. The intercom. His private line to her desk. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. She pressed the button, her hand shaking. "Yes, sir?" Her voice was a stranger's, thin and reedy. His voice came back, a low baritone that was always perfectly modulated, never raised, which made it all the more terrifying. It was like the calm before a tsunami. "My office."
Now.
The line went dead. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. She stood, smoothing down her pencil skirt, a useless, reflexive gesture of normalcy in a moment that was anything but. The walk to his door was the longest of her life. Each step on the polished black marble was an indictment. The heavy oak door seemed to absorb all sound. She knocked once, a soft tap that felt like a scream. "Enter." She pushed the door open and stepped inside. He wasn't at his massive, obsidian desk. He was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to her, a perfect silhouette against the glittering expanse of Gangnam. He wore a charcoal Tom Ford suit that was probably worth more than her college degree. He didn't turn around. The only sign he knew she was there was the stillness that fell over him, the posture of a predator that has sensed its prey. "You sent me a message, Ms. Vaughn," he said to the glass. His voice was calm, almost conversational. It was the most dangerous sound she had ever heard. "Mr. Kwon," she began, her throat dry. "I am so sorry. That was a mistake. It was meant for my sister." He was silent for a long moment, letting her explanation hang in the air, letting it wither and die. She could see his reflection in the window, his expression unreadable, his features carved from stone. He held his phone in his hand, the screen dark. He knew what it said. Your sister, he repeated, the words flat. He finally turned, and his eyes found hers. They were dark, so dark they seemed to pull the light from the room, and they held an intelligence that was ancient and unforgiving. He took a slow step toward her, then another. He moved with a deliberate grace that was mesmerizing and terrifying in equal measure. He stopped just a few feet away, close enough that she could smell the faint, clean scent of cedar and bergamot from his cologne. You miss her, he stated. It wasn't a question. It was an observation, a piece of data he was filing away. Yes, sir. Very much. He looked down at his own phone, then back at her. Personal sentiment is a liability. It is a weakness an enemy can exploit. You are in a position that requires you to have no weaknesses, he paused, his gaze so intense she felt pinned in place. I do not tolerate liabilities in my organization. This was it. She was fired. Or worse. In his world, termination of employment wasn't always a simple HR matter. She straightened her spine, lifting her chin. If she was going to be dismissed, she would face it with dignity. I understand, sir. It will not happen again. No, he said softly. It won't. He raised his phone and, with a deliberate motion of his thumb, deleted the message. Just like that, the evidence was gone. But the knowledge of it remained, hanging between them, a permanent stain on her flawless record. You will be working late tonight. There are security reports from the Incheon transfer that require cross-referencing. You will do it here, where I can observe you. It wasn't a reprieve. It was a punishment, a test. He was pulling her deeper in, not pushing her out. He was putting her under his direct surveillance. She didn't know which was worse. Of course, Mr. Kwon, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her soul. He gave a curt nod and turned back to the window, dismissing her. She retreated from his office, her back straight, her mind reeling. The door clicked shut behind her, and she let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She had made a mistake and survived. But as she sat back at her desk, under the weight of his silent observation from the room next door, she understood. That was the moment everything changed. She was no longer just a secretary. She was a liability he had decided to keep. The hours that followed were a study in tension. Amara worked with feverish focus, the clacking of her keyboard the only sound in the vast, silent office. She could feel his presence through the wall, a palpable weight. He was a man who took up space even when he was in another room. She cross-referenced cargo manifests with security logs, her mind sharp, her movements efficient. She would prove to him that her error was an anomaly, a single crack in an otherwise perfect facade. Around 2 a.m., a call came through on his private line. She watched the light on her console blink, but she didn't listen in. That was a line she would never cross. But she could hear the low murmur of his voice through the door. The cadence changed. The calm, controlled tone became clipped, hard. It was a single word she heard clearly, a name. Sujin. The way he said it was wrong. It was like jagged glass. When he emerged from his office a few minutes later, the mask was back in place, but she could see the cracks. There was a tightness around his jaw, a darkness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. He walked to the wet bar in the corner of the main office and poured himself a whiskey, his movements stiff. On the corner of his massive desk, a small, silver picture frame was usually turned away from view. In his distraction, he had knocked it slightly. For the first time, Amara could see the photograph it held. A woman with a brilliant, infectious smile and eyes that crinkled at the corners. She was beautiful. She looked happy.
Alive.
He saw Amara looking. His gaze snapped to her, then to the frame. In an instant, he was across the room, his hand closing around the frame and turning it face down with a sharp, definitive click. The action was violent in its finality. Your work, he said, his voice a low growl. Is it finished? Almost, sir. He said nothing more, merely returned to his office, the whiskey untouched. That is when she made the mistake of looking up. And what she did not know yet was that she had just witnessed the one vulnerability he carried, the ghost that haunted his empire. An hour later, the world ended in a shower of glass. An explosion from the floor below rocked the building, a deep, guttural roar that vibrated up through the soles of her feet. The lights flickered and died, plunging the office into emergency backup lighting, a hellish red glow that painted everything in blood. Then, the alarms began to shriek, a piercing, relentless scream. Amara's training kicked in. She dropped to the floor, crawling under her desk, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. This wasn't a fire drill. This was an attack. The door to his office flew open. Kwon Tae-jun stood there, a shadow in the crimson light. He held a sleek, black pistol in his hand, held with a familiarity that was terrifying. He wasn't panicked. He was focused, his eyes scanning the room with predatory calm. He moved like violence was a language he was born speaking. "With me," he commanded. His voice cut through the noise of the alarms. He didn't wait for a reply. He was at her desk in 3 long strides, his hand closing around her upper arm, pulling her to her feet. His grip was like steel. He pulled her behind him, his body a solid shield between her and the shattered windows overlooking the city. Another series of pops echoed from the hallway, gunfire. "They breached the lower levels," he said, his voice low and close to her ear, his breath warm against her skin. "They're coming up." His men, shadows in dark suits, materialized in the office, moving with the same brutal efficiency as their boss. They exchanged clipped, coded words. "The Choi family.
Arrival faction."
This was a direct assault, an attempt to decapitate his organization by taking him out in his own fortress. He pushed her toward his office. "Stay inside. Do not open the door for anyone but me." But as he turned, a stray bullet from the hall ricocheted off the doorframe. A shard of metal, and wood flew through the air. He flinched, a sharp, almost imperceptible movement. He didn't make a sound, but Amara saw it. A dark stain spreading on the sleeve of his white shirt, just below the shoulder. He ignored it, his focus entirely on the threat outside. He and his men formed a perimeter. But Amara couldn't ignore it. The world was chaos, alarms blaring, guns firing, but all she could see was the red seeping into the pristine white fabric. He shoved her into his office. "Stay down." The door closed, but it didn't lock. Through the gap, she could see the firefight unfolding in flashes of muzzle fire.
She had a choice.
She could hide. She could cower in the corner and wait for it to be over, wait for him to either win or die. That was the smart choice, the sane choice.
She did not take it.
She scrambled into his private bathroom, a room larger than her first apartment, all black marble and chrome. She knew he kept a comprehensive first aid kit under the sink. She'd stocked it herself. Her hands were shaking, but her movements were sure. She grabbed antiseptic wipes, gauze, butterfly bandages. When she came back out, the gunfire had subsided. Tae-jun was inside the office, barking orders into his phone, his back to her. The lockdown was initiated. Steel shutters were sliding down over the windows, encasing them in a metal tomb. He hung up and finally leaned against his desk, the adrenaline starting to fade, allowing the pain to register. He looked at his arm, his expression one of pure annoyance. Amara stepped forward.
"Sir."
"Let me see." He looked up, surprised to see her standing there, holding medical supplies instead of hiding under his desk. His eyes narrowed. "I am fine." "You are bleeding," she countered, her professional tone kicking in, the tone she used to manage stubborn clients and impossible schedules. "And you'll get an infection if it's not cleaned. Sit down." For a moment, she thought he would refuse. He was a man who never showed weakness, who never accepted help. But he looked at her, at the steady determination in her eyes, at the supplies held in her unwavering hands, and something shifted in his expression. He gave a sharp, reluctant nod and sat in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. She knelt before him, carefully pushing up his sleeve. The cut was deep, a nasty gash from the shrapnel, bleeding sluggishly. She worked in silence, her focus absolute. She cleaned the wound with an antiseptic wipe, her touch gentle but firm. He flinched slightly at the sting, his muscles tensing under her fingers. The man who commanded a criminal empire, who had just survived an assassination attempt without blinking, flinched at the touch of an alcohol swab. The thought was so absurdly human it almost made her smile. She worked, aware of his stillness, of his gaze on her. He was watching her every move, his dark eyes unreadable. The silence between them was not empty. It was filled with a shriek of the distant alarms, the smell of cordite and antiseptic, and a tension that had nothing to do with the danger outside. As she placed a piece of gauze over the wound, his other hand came up and covered hers, his fingers warm and strong against her skin. His touch sent a jolt through her. "Enough," he said, his voice rough. She looked up. Their faces were inches apart. His eyes held hers, and for the first time, she saw something flicker beneath the cold, hard surface. It wasn't gratitude. It was something more complex.
Surprise.
Assessment. Maybe even a sliver of respect. In that moment, he wasn't seeing his secretary. He was seeing the woman who ran toward the danger to help him when she could have hidden. He was seeing her. That was the first charged moment between them, born not of romance, but of survival. The air crackled. The world outside, with its assassins and its empires, faded away, leaving only the two of them in the red glow of the emergency lights, his hand on hers, a silent acknowledgement passing between them that neither of them was ready to name. The lockdown lasted for 4 hours. When the all-clear was given and the steel shutters retracted, the office was a wreck, but the threat had been neutralized. His men had been brutally efficient. But Kwon Tae-jun knew the Choi family would not stop. They had shown their hand, and they would not retreat now. He stood by the shattered window, looking down at the city, now quiet in the pre-dawn light. Amara had finished cleaning up the medical supplies, her movements calm and deliberate. She was waiting for him to dismiss her, to send her home. He turned to face her. "You can't go home." The words were flat, absolute. "The choice know this building was breached. They will be watching everyone who leaves. They saw you with me. To them, you are now a target." Amara's blood ran cold. "A target?" "They will see you as leverage," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "My weakness." They were right about one thing. Personal sentiment is a liability. He was looking at her, but his eyes were distant, remembering the face in the silver frame. "You will stay at my penthouse. It is the only place in the city I can guarantee your safety." It was not a request. It was an order. Her life, as she knew it, was over. She was no longer just an employee. She was a chess piece in his bloody game. That night, she was escorted by 2 silent guards to his private elevator, which opened directly into a penthouse that was less a home and more a minimalist fortress of glass and steel. Her cage had just gotten much larger and infinitely more dangerous. The days that followed were a blur of forced proximity and simmering tension. She was a prisoner in paradise, with a view that could break your heart and a warden who watched her with an intensity that frayed her nerves. He worked from the penthouse, and she worked alongside him, maintaining the facade of secretary and boss while the world outside their gilded cage plotted their deaths. The choice grew bolder. One afternoon, while Tae-jun was driving them to a supposedly secure meeting, they were ambushed. A black sedan slammed into their armored car, sending them spinning across the rain-slicked street. Another car boxed them in. Gunfire erupted, spiderwebbing the bulletproof glass. Tae-jun didn't hesitate. He unbuckled his seatbelt and threw his body over hers, shielding her as bullets hammered against the window just inches from her head. His weight was heavy, solid, the scent of his cologne and the clean smell of his shirt filling her senses. She could feel the hard thump of his heart against her back. For a terrifying, breathless second, as the car rocked with another impact, she thought he'd been hit. A raw, primal fear seized her, fear not for herself, but for him. The realization was a shock to her system. He moved with lethal grace, pushing her down, retrieving a pistol from a hidden compartment, and returning fire through the windshield with chilling precision. The fight was over in minutes. He had neutralized the threat, but she had seen the cost in the cold fury in his eyes. He had almost lost control. He had almost lost her. They abandoned the car and made their way to a nearby safe house, a nondescript apartment in an older part of the city. One of the Choi assassins had been captured alive. His men had him tied to a chair in the sparse living room. He was beaten, bloody, but defiant. He spat on the floor and laughed. Taejun's patience was gone. He picked up a pair of pliers from a toolkit, his intentions brutally clear. He was going to break the man, piece by piece. Amara watched, her stomach churning. This was the monster she worked for. The man who solved problems with pain.
But then she noticed something.
The assassin wasn't looking at Taejun with fear. He was looking at him with the vacant eyes of a man who had already accepted his death. He wasn't motivated by loyalty. She had seen his file. She organized everything. She remembered everything. Choi Min-jun, low-level enforcer. His file had a footnote, a detail most would overlook. A sister with a rare blood disorder, astronomical medical bills. She stepped forward. Mr. Kwan. Stop. He turned, his eyes blazing with cold fire. This does not concern you. You're wasting your time, she said, her voice shaking but firm.
He's not afraid to die.
He's afraid she will. Taejun's eyes narrowed. She? His sister. Amara said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. Her medical bills are being paid by the Choi family.
He's not loyal to them.
He's indebted. Use that. Don't threaten him. Threaten her. The room went silent. Taejun's men stared at her, shocked. Taejun himself looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. He saw not a frightened secretary, but a strategist. He saw a mind as cold and calculating as his own. She had just handed him the perfect weapon. She had just crossed a line she could never uncross. He lowered the pliers. He leaned in close to the assassin and whispered something in his ear. The man's defiance crumbled. He broke, sobbing, telling them everything. Amara turned away, sick to her stomach. She had just helped him destroy a man by using the one pure thing in his life. She had used his love for his sister as a weapon. She was becoming one of them. Later that night, back in the sterile silence of the penthouse, the tension between them was a living thing. He stood by the window, a glass of whiskey in his hand, looking out at the city he ruled. He had been silent for over an hour. Soo-jin was like you, he said suddenly, his voice raw. He didn't turn to look at her. She always saw the good in people. She believed everyone could be saved. He took a slow sip of his whiskey. It got her killed. They used her compassion against her. Against me. Amara stood her ground. I didn't see good in him, she said, her voice quiet but hard. I saw a lever. I saw a vulnerability and told you how to exploit it. That's what you taught me to see. He finally turned to face her. He crossed the space between them in 2 slow steps, his eyes searching hers. No, he whispered, his voice thick with a dangerous emotion. I taught you to see patterns.
To see logistics.
You learned to see the soul of a man and how to break it all on your own. He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek, a touch so gentle it was a brand. You are the most dangerous thing in this apartment, Amara, because you see everything. It was not a declaration of love. It was a confession, an admission that she had a power over him that no one else did. She didn't just organize his world, she understood it. And him. The information from the broken assassin gave Taejun the upper hand. But the Choice were cornered animals and they lashed out. They couldn't get to him, so they went after her. Not directly.
They were smarter than that.
They found her sister, Maya, an ocean away. A message arrived on Taejun's secure phone. It was a single photograph. Maya, laughing as she walked her dog in a Chicago park, a beautiful autumn day. She was completely unaware of the man with the long-lens camera watching her from across the street. There was no threat attached. None was needed. The message was clear. We know your weakness. And now we know hers. The fight was no longer about territory or power. It was about Amara. And Taejun's rage was a cold, silent thing that promised absolute destruction. He began to plan a final, decisive strike against the Choi family patriarch himself. A full-scale assault on their headquarters. He told Amara she would be taken to a secure bunker outside the city until it was over. Safe. Locked away. No, she said, standing before him in his command center, a room lit by the glow of a dozen monitors. This is not a negotiation, he stated, his voice flat. My sister is in danger because of me. She shot back, her voice ringing with a strength she didn't know she possessed. My family is on the board now. That makes this my fight, too. You will not lock me away, like some fragile possession. She pointed to the tactical map on the main screen. Your assault plan is flawed. You're planning a primary entry through the service tunnels. But you're forgetting the city is rerouting the sewage lines on that block. I know because I rescheduled your real estate division's inspection of the adjacent property 3 times. The schematics are wrong. The tunnels will be flooded and blocked. Your men will walk into a trap. He stared at the screen, then at her. His entire team of strategists had missed it. A simple, logistical detail from his legitimate business world that she, his secretary, remembered. Her intelligence was her weapon. A long silence stretched. He looked at her, at the fire in her eyes, the unshakable resolve in her stance. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. You will not be on the front line, but you will be here, with me. During the assault, she was a blur of focused energy in the command center, coordinating communications, tracking assets. She was born for this, for managing chaos. Then it happened. The comms for his primary infiltration team went dead. Static. They were blind, deep inside the Choi compound. The plan was falling apart. Taejun was about to send in a backup team, a suicide mission to salvage the operation. Wait, Amara said, her fingers flying across a keyboard, pulling up city infrastructure grids. There's another way. She found it, an old, unsecured fiber optic line for the subway's maintenance system. It ran directly beneath the Choi building. It was a massive risk, a 1 in a million shot. I can reroute the comms, she said, not looking at him, her focus absolute. Get me a frequency. He stared at her, then gave a sharp order to his tech team. He was trusting her. He was betting his entire operation, the lives of his men, on her hunch. She made the call, her voice clear and calm as she bypassed firewalls and rerouted signals. She fed the trap team the intel they needed, guiding them through the building using blueprints she had memorized. She did not wait for his permission at every turn. She acted. She took control. She saved them. The battle was won. The Choi Empire crumbled. When Taejun walked back into the command center hours later, he was covered in dust and grime, but he was victorious. He walked straight to her, ignoring his celebrating men. He stood before her, the cold mask of the boss gone completely, replaced by something raw and unveiled. They targeted you to break me, he said, his voice low, for her ears only. They thought you were my weakness. He reached out, his hand cupping her jaw, his thumb stroking her skin. The touch was possessive, reverent. They didn't understand. You are not my weakness, Amara. You are the only part of this empire that is not replaceable. The cost of this victory was steep. Good men had died. And Amara knew, with a chilling certainty, that the ordinary woman she once was had died with them. She could never go back. That innocence was the price she had paid to enter his world, and to survive it. He looked at her, his dark eyes asking a question he would never speak aloud. A question about her place in this new world she had helped him secure. She didn't answer with words. She reached up, her movements slow and deliberate, and straightened his tie, a simple, proprietary gesture she had performed 100 times before as his secretary. But this time, it was an answer, an acceptance, a claim. It was a choice, made with open eyes. He covered her hand with his grip firm, unshakable. He was not letting her go. He would never let her go. Outside, the first light of dawn was breaking over Seoul, the lights of the city glittering like a kingdom at their feet. It was a beautiful, terrifying world, and it was now hers as much as it was his. She had sent a message by mistake, 3 simple words born of loneliness. But he was the one who had answered with a truth that had changed her life, a truth whispered in the language of violence, loyalty, and a claim that was absolute. There was no going back. There was only forward. Together,